Hi, folks. My name is Mike Dobbs. I'm managing editor for Reminder Publishing, and you're watching Government Matters here on Focus Springfield. And today we've got a very interesting guest because it's a twofer. One guest, two different positions. State Representative Orlando Ramos, also Springfield City Councilor Orlando Ramos. We're going to try not to be too schizophrenic here in terms of what we are talking about. I think we're going to start off with some state issues that Orlando is involved in very directly. And then we're also going to talk about some city council kinds of issues as well. Thanks very much for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the sports betting bill that you're involved in. There's a lot of sports betting bills going on.
There are.
The governor has one. Various members of the House and various members of the Senate have got their own. Mm-hmm. What interested me about the bill that you're involved in is the concept of social equity. Mm. So at this point, in the last few years, we've seen not only casino gaming come on board, we've seen the legalization of cannabis come on board. Mm-hmm. And the question is, how do these economic development issues then translate down to the entrepreneur level? And we've seen, particularly with cannabis, that it's not translated very well down to entrepreneurs. So here we're talking about sports betting, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your bill is the first that I've seen that actually is addressing how do we allow people who are already in business, in the hospitality business, for instance, in bars and restaurants, how can we help them through sports betting? So can you walk us through what you would like to see have done?
Absolutely. So my bill, which is a mirror version of the bill that was proposed in the Senate by Senator Adam Gomez, is the only bill, sports betting bill, that's currently being proposed that has a racial equity component to it. When you look at the two industries that you just mentioned, multi-billion-dollar industries that we just welcomed into the Commonwealth of Massachusetts over the past decade, casino gaming and the cannabis industry, there are no people of color who own casinos in Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and there are very few, despite the efforts of many legislators at the state level and the Gaming Commission to come up with language that was relative to racial equity. There are very few black and brown business owners who own cannabis businesses. And so we want to get it right this time around with sports betting. Here we are in another position to yet again welcome a multi-billion-dollar industry into the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And we have to talk about how we're going to make it so that we give everyone an opportunity to benefit from this industry. The only way that we're going to be able to do that is by having this racial equity component in it and by allowing restaurants and bars to partake in this new industry. If this component is not allowed into the final version of the bill, then we're talking about, again, monopolizing another multi-billion-dollar industry to casinos and these online sports betting apps, which, to my knowledge, none are owned by black and brown people. So the idea is that this isn't going to happen organically. You know, we saw that with cannabis. I think a lot of people sort of assumed that we were organically going to see a lot more black and brown entrepreneurs take part in this new industry. But there were so many barriers in the way that it was almost impossible for people to without the capital and without the help. And without any legislation that was specifically directed towards directly helping these folks financially, they weren't able to do that organically. We have a racial wealth gap in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and across the country. And there's an income racial wealth gap in the Commonwealth and across the country. And part of the reason is because of legislation, laws that have that continue to haunt us today. These pieces of legislation that were passed decades, centuries ago, that put people of color at a disadvantage. And so it was legislation that helped create this gap. And we have to be intentional about using legislation to help close the gap. And this is just one piece that we can use to do that.
So are you envisioning licensing sports gaming in sort of like we've licensed Keno, individual restaurants, bars, and venues like that, even convenience stores, long have been benefiting from having a Keno terminal and a Keno screen and the ability for people to play Keno. So are you envisioning something like that where sports betting would basically be sort of spread out? We're not talking about concentrating it in just the three casinos we have, and then online with DraftKings and those type of businesses. So are you seeing this sort of democratized out into areas that already understand how to participate with gaming products such as Keno?
That's the idea. The idea is to have another option, right? There are a lot of people who don't feel comfortable putting their credit card information into a sports app, for example. And they may be too far from a casino to drive, right? So if they're sitting at a bar in their hometown and they want to place a bet on the game that's on TV, they can do that right at kiosk that will be placed at that location. So that person would not have to leave that bar or restaurant, that mom and pop owned business, in order to go to a multi-billion-dollar casino to place a bet. So that's the idea, is to keep people where they are in their bars or restaurants and enjoy the game, and they can place their bet at a kiosk if they don't feel comfortable doing the sports app. We're just giving people a multitude, just another option to place a bet, and then of course the bar or restaurant would benefit from that bet that is placed at their location.
So under your bill, you would still see the online component, you would still see the casino component, but then you would have this third component
Exactly.
of
Yep.
an individual bar, restaurant owner being able to participate.
Correct.
In terms of, and I'm curious because there's a lot of latitude in these sports betting bills about what we're going to bet on. Some of the bills talk almost exclusively about this is going to be on major league professional sports. Then other people want it to be on college sports, and if it's not day-to-day college sports, then it would be like March Madness, or it would be the football bowl games. Does your bill address what the wagering would be on, or do you yourself as a member of the legislature have a preference on what you want to see bet on and what you want to see not bet on?
So that is one piece that we decided to sort of leave out of the bill because I think we're flexible. I'm flexible. I'm open to the idea of either including or excluding college sports. I think we have to have a discussion as to whether or not, if we do include college sports, do we include, for example, universities that are located in Massachusetts, which is one thing that that other states have done. They sort of included college sports, but they've excluded universities in which they're
So their
in a
state
in which-
university their state university systems are out of the
Exactly.
play then. Okay.
So that's one option. There's several different options that we can go with, but we didn't. We left that out for discussion. One thing I will mention, one type of sport that we excluded from our bill intentionally was we wanted to make sure that there were no bets being placed on any sports involving an animal, and for a multitude of reasons, right? I think that was important for us to address in our bill.
Okay, so horse racing would not be part of this.
Correct.
And I don't believe I don't think we have a greyhound track left in Massachusetts, but I may be wrong in
think so.
that. It's not something that I'm really familiar with.
Yeah.
So far, what has the reception been like from your fellow legislators about the approach that you and Senator Gomez have brought forth here?
It's been very welcomed by our colleagues. I think that this is one of the reasons why it's so important to have diversity in the legislature, because otherwise I don't know how we would have been able to bring this information to our colleagues, right? When we're talking about sports betting and you look at there were 18 other bills that were proposed in the House and in the Senate, and none of them had a racial equity component. But then here we are, first-term legislators, both people of color here from the city of Springfield, and this was our number one concern. This was the number one thing that we brought to this piece of legislation, and that's why it's important to have that sort of diversity in government and to have that voice and to be able to make a difference in again, something that's going to be very impactful to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So far, it's been receptive, and I think that we're going to see, hopefully, see a racial equity component to the bill.
Do you know if any other state with sports betting has similar kinds of legislation?
Yes, I was told recently that Virginia may have some language that we may want to consider. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but I will. And if there are things in there that we can use and emulate here in Massachusetts, then we'll certainly do that.
Well, especially with trying to rebuild our economy post-pandemic, post kind of sort of pandemic. We're not over yet.
Yeah.
This strikes me that this would be a very integral piece to give to an entire economic sector, the hospitality sector, that could really help them.
Yes.
And could mean, saying things like hiring additional people, providing more jobs, providing more taxes, that type of thing.
And that was, again, the idea behind it. Number one, providing that racial equity component to give Black and brown businesses the opportunity to benefit, but also just bars and restaurants in general that have suffered through this pandemic, and they've been hurt, right? So we want to do whatever we can to help support that industry. But apart from what is in the policy part of the bill, what makes it a racially equitable bill, in addition to that, is where the revenue is going to go. And there is a provision in our bill that would send 5% of the tax generated from this bill to the restaurant and hospitality industry to help recover from the COVID-19 pandemic.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll switch gears to another tax issue, so to speak. I'm sure that you're aware that Governor Baker has proposed not just a tax-free weekend, which we normally have in August, but that there would be no sales taxes for anything under $2,500 for the months of August and September. I've started asking a number of legislators about it, so I'm going to put you on the spot now and ask what you think about this. Is this something that you believe is a viable way to help small business, or do you believe that the Commonwealth cannot afford to lose this tax revenue because, of course, the future is always a little bit uncertain about what kind of funds that we're going to need?
Well, I'm always open to new ideas. I'm not the type of person that would just close the door on something that I don't agree with. I think there is some merit to this idea. I'm not sure if 2 months is the number, but we certainly could entertain the idea of having extended period of time for tax-free shopping. The businesses, local businesses, small businesses could definitely benefit from that sort of idea. So I'm open to it, and I'm open to having that discussion.
One of your colleagues told me that he was concerned that restaurants were not included in this. In other words, state meal taxes, because again, restaurants have been hit very hard. Would that be something that you'd be also open to consider if it comes up in debate?
Sure, absolutely, definitely. That's that's one of the things that we try to address and fight for however we can. I was very vocal throughout the pandemic, both with the local administration and the state administration, about doing everything that we can legislatively to help bars and restaurants and small businesses, and again, just the retail industry overall. So I'm open to that.
Now, I know that you're a relatively new member of the General Court, but I wanted to ask you, how difficult has it been to try to do the business of the legislature through Zoom meetings and other equivalent virtual meetings. Has it been much more difficult in order to just have that simple conversations that legislators have among each other?
Yeah. The interesting thing is that we don't really, as a freshman class, we don't really have anything to compare it to, because this is the
That's
only
true.
thing that we know, right? So it's had its challenges, pros and cons, right? I think that in this Zoom virtual world, we're able to be in more places throughout the day. I can go from one meeting in the district to a meeting in Boston in just a matter of seconds by pushing a button. So that has its benefits. I'm saving money on gas, not having to drive to the State House, multiple times a week. But then it also has its challenges. I still have colleagues in the House that I haven't had a chance to meet. People that I'm going to be working with over the next few years closely and intimately. And so, that kind of thing is very difficult. I came in with a little bit of a different perspective, because I did work in the Senate for 8.5 years. And I have been a legislator in the past, a municipal legislator. So I came in with a little bit of a different perspective, and I kind of knew what to expect. And I know what it's like to be in the House during budget season and those late night meetings. But for those who haven't had that experience, it has been very difficult. And even for me, I've had things that I still need to learn that I haven't been able to learn in the virtual world.
Okay, so we're going to switch your affiliation here from the House to the City Council.
Sure.
So recently, you announced an ordinance that you would like the council to consider to try to address this issue that we've had in Springfield. We also have it in other communities as well. This is just not a Springfield issue, and that's people running dirt bikes up and down the street. A lot of them are underage. A lot of them don't have licenses. A lot of the bikes certainly are not sanctioned for street use. Yeah. I know a lot of people are concerned about the noise, but I know a lot of other people are simply concerned about safety. Sure. Safety issues as you're driving your car, and if somebody is passing you on the right on a dirt bike, and what that might mean. So talk a bit about what you've proposed and what you want to see out of this.
Sure. So what I've currently proposing in the City Council is an ordinance that would prohibit gas stations from selling gasoline to dirt bikers. It's not an original idea. This idea actually came from the state of Connecticut, where there are several municipalities that already have this on the books. It's starting to be a national trend. Pennsylvania has a lot of municipalities there that have passed this ordinance, and there have been several cities and towns in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that have expressed interest in putting this on the books, including Worcester, Holyoke, some other surrounding areas. And I think it's just the intent of it is just to be another tool to combat this issue of illegal dirt biking. It's not a cure-all. It's not going to fix the problem on its own. But we're just trying to give our police department just another tool to be able to get these dirt bikes off the road. A couple of years ago, the City Council supported my ordinance to increase fines for illegal dirt biking in the city. And we also passed a home rule petition, which is currently in the House, to give the police department the authority to confiscate these vehicles and eventually crush them. So again, we passed those two. Hopefully we'll pass the gas ordinance and just make it another tool that we can use to get these dangerous vehicles off the street. People don't realize is that they're called off-road vehicles for a reason. They're not made to be on the roads. These things are dangerous, and we've seen people not only get hurt, but we've had a few deaths related to illegal dirt biking. So it's not just a nuisance. It's not just annoying. It's a public safety issue. It's dangerous. People are dying. So we have to do whatever we can to address this problem, even if it means, that it'll lead to other inconveniences. It might be a minor inconvenience for a gas station owner to train their employees, to do this. But I don't see it as anything different as compared to denying someone the sale of alcohol, for example. You just deny the transaction. That's it. And I'm hoping to get the business owners on board with this ordinance because, again, people are getting hurt and people are dying because of illegal dirt bikes.
Now, you mentioned that other municipalities have enacted something like this. In your research, have you seen, has it made a difference? Have these municipalities seen maybe a decrease in this kind of activity?
It has, actually. So the closest town that we work with was New Haven, Connecticut, and they've had their ordinance on the books since December of 2020. So the last time that I spoke with them, they actually attended one of our subcommittee meetings in the Public Safety Committee. We were told that the ordinance was too new to collect data, so we weren't able to get any data from that ordinance. However, I did contact the city of Hartford, which said, to me that they haven't had any issues with the ordinance. They haven't had any complaints from the gas stations, and it has cut down on dirt bikers not being able to get gas. Excellent.
Another issue here in the city that the city council has been grappling with for a while is, of course, the start of a civilian police commission that would be overseeing it. And I know that we're sort of in the middle of a legal challenge about all this. The mayor has maintained that the city charter says one thing. The city councilors who have been in favor of this believe that they're on the right with this. So I was wondering, considering everything that has happened in terms of reviewing the activities of certain members of the Springfield Police Department and reviewing whether or not we should have a police commissioner that we have now in terms of the structure of that job. What are your thoughts about this, and where are we basically standing on this particular issue?
Well, number one, my support of the ordinance that created a police commission in the city of Springfield has nothing to do with the personnel in the police department. It has nothing to do with the current commissioner. It was basically a comparison between two different systems. It was a police commission system, which would include a civilian, a 5-member civilian board, which would be in charge of hiring, firing, and discipline. And then it would have a chief, a police chief, which would be in charge of the day-to-day operations of the police department, compared to the current system, which is a single commissioner who has the authority to hire, fire, and discipline, and then a supplemental police review board that doesn't really, to no fault of their own, doesn't really have any teeth, doesn't really have any authority. They just basically serve as a recommendation board, and it's up to the commissioner as to whether or not to take their recommendation. I felt that the better system was the police commission system, which is why I signed on to the ordinance, and I voted in favor of the ordinance more than once because it was passed, one of the first bills that I voted on as an elected official. It was then amended to include different language in the ordinance, which I voted for. It was vetoed by the mayor twice, and I voted twice to override that veto. So I supported it because it's a better system. Now, to get to your point about the police department itself, so we wouldn't have this issue if we had a better system for discipline, if we had more transparency in terms of discipline, if we had a better disciplinary record in our police department and in our city. We've seen police officers get away with causing harm to people in the city of Springfield. We have the Greg Bigda incident. We have the incident of the young 15-year-old who ran into traffic and was killed on East Columbus Avenue. Those officers were not only not disciplined, right? I mean, they should have been fired. Greg Bigda received a 20-day suspension or whatever it was, and ended up getting indicted after that, which is the only reason why we were able to hold him accountable, because the federal government held him accountable. But the other gentleman, the police officer that was involved in the Delano Walker incident, was not only not disciplined, but he was promoted. And it's the same thing over and over. We have these officers that have become problem officers who are not disciplined, and they continue to be promoted throughout the department. So that's an issue. If we hadn't had that, then we wouldn't have the conversation about whether or not we should change the disciplinary system of the police department. So I think that the police department, whether it's past or present commissioners or whoever may have been in charge of discipline or anyone that's partaken into this culture of protecting police officers, they force our hand to create a better system and to give that power to civilians who hopefully will be more vigilant in disciplining officers for doing wrong.
I think what people have forgotten about is that, our police department was, the narcotics division in particular, was the subject of a Department of Justice investigation,
Yep.
Which was quite damning when you read actually what they found and what they said. It really indicates that we have problems that we have to address. And I wonder at this point, do you feel that we are going to get to a position where we're going to get some resolution, whether it's a court decision or whether it's a change of heart with the administration? Clearly, we need to get some sort of resolution to this issue.
Absolutely. And if you were to take those two examples, change of heart for the administration or some sort of federal intervention that would force the city of Springfield into change, I think the latter is more likely. I don't believe that the administration is going to have a change of heart. They've been very stern on their position about being I think there's been a lot of denial about what's wrong with the police department, about whether or not there's anything wrong with the police department. And there's been a lot of inaction from the administration. So I don't believe that we're going to get anywhere without any federal intervention, which is why I believe that the best thing for the city of Springfield that could happen would be for the federal government, the Department of Justice, to force the city of Springfield into a consent decree to make those changes and to force those changes, because otherwise it's not going to happen with the current system.
Do you find this terribly ironic when we're a city where the black and brown population is greater than the white population? So therefore, we've seen great strides in having a city council that actually more accurately reflects our community in terms of race and ethnic background.
Sure.
Obviously, we need a police department that also reflects our city in terms of who lives here and what the concerns are. Do you think that, I mean, that's a huge next step, but do you think that that's where we have to go?
Yeah, and I know that the Springfield Police Department is pretty diverse when you look at the officers, right? When you look at the entry level positions in the police department, you have a lot of diversity there. It gets less and less diverse as you go up in rank. Unfortunately, there are several reasons, and there's several things that we need to fix within the police department. But that itself, diversity in itself, is not going to change the way that the community feels about police officers, because it's an important part of it. It's an important component of it. But more than anything, yes, we want our police officers to reflect the demographics of the community, but we also want them to be good officers. We also want them to treat the community with respect. We also want them to be well trained so that they're not mistreating people or continuing to do the things that the less diverse police officers were doing. That makes no sense. Is going to continue on the same trend. So I think it's important to have diversity in all levels of the Springfield Police Department, not just the entry level positions, and we have to make sure that those officers are well trained. And we're not asking for too much, right? When we talk about police reform, and we're talking to the commissioner or the mayor or to anyone in the police department about what we expect to see and what we would like to see from them and the way that they treat our people. Treat people like people. That's not too much to ask. We're not asking for a lot. We're not. We're saying we're human beings. People who are living in these black and brown communities are human beings. We're all human, and we expect to be treated as such. We expect to be treated with respect. And when you look at the way that the police officers treat our people, it's disrespectful. and that leads to a lot of problems, right? It's not just, you're disrespecting me. That escalates things. That leads to different. That may lead to violence. That may lead to arrests, which are unnecessary. So police officers have to be better trained, basically.
So I'm going to switch gears once again because I meant to ask you when we're talking about your role as a state representative about the safe swimming bill.
Yes.
So let's talk about a little bit about that.
Sure. So I propose a bill in the House that is aimed at increasing safe swimming in Black and brown communities. There was a study that was conducted by the University of Memphis, and it was it concluded that African American children, 70% of African American children have little to no swimming ability, and 60% of Latino children have little to no swimming ability compared to 40% of non-minority children. So there's a discrepancy there, and what that study highlighted was the fact that part of the reason why that is because there's a lack of access to safe swimming, to swimming pools in Black and brown communities. During the Romney administration back in 2004, a lot of people don't know this, the process and within the Massachusetts Building Authority, School Building Authority, changed their policy to exclude swimming pools from reimbursement. Prior to 2004, when you build a swimming pool, when you build a school and you attach a swimming pool to it, it was 80% reimbursed by the state. No longer the case as of 2004. That was done as a cost-saving measure. Swimming pools were labeled as luxury items, and so they were no longer eligible for reimbursement. And this is the kind of thing that we keep talking about when we talk about institutional racism, structural racism, things that are intended to save money, but they don't realize that they have a huge impact on Black and brown people. And this is one of those bills where when you look at the statistics that I just mentioned in terms of swimming, a swimming pool is not a luxury in a Black and brown community. It's a necessity. It's a public health issue. It's a public safety issue. It could save lives. So my bill would reverse that decision and make swimming pools eligible for reimbursement from the School Building Commission.
That's very interesting because I had never thought about it from that angle. So yeah, it sounds like it's something that we really need to do.
Sure.
So how crazy is it to be a state rep and a city councilor at the same time? I mean, honestly, a lot of your concerns on the city level can be reflected in the House.
Yes.
And vice versa. Mm-hmm. But you're sort of in a fairly unique position of being able to see issues and bills from those two different perspectives, no matter how linked they may be. Yeah. So what's your process like, Orlando? I mean, when you're dealing with issues, do you think of them as both as a city councilor and as a member of the House? So how do you do this?
Yeah, I look at it from both perspectives. Obviously, our office receives a lot of phone calls from constituents who have different issues that they want to address that they need help with. And so anytime that I hear of an issue, anytime I talk to a constituent, I look at it from both points of view to see which hat I can put on to best help resolve the issue. And in a lot of instances, it's both, actually. There are things that can be addressed both at the local level and at the state level. So whenever that is the case, then I would talk to both either the law department at the local level or our general counsel at the House to talk about how we can propose a bill to address this issue. But it's I'm blessed. I feel that this is a opportunity that just doesn't come around, and I feel very privileged to be in this position to be able to help people. I never really thought that I was. To be honest, I never thought that I would be in public office. I'm a carpenter by trade. I was swinging a hammer for 10 years before I ran for office, and I loved it, and I enjoyed it, and I thought that I was going to be a carpenter until I retired, unfortunately. But, I mean, God had a different plan for me, and this is what I fell in love with. I fell in love with public service, and even if it means no sleep, even if it means a lot of hours, a lot of gas, burning a lot of gas in my car. I love what I do. I love it, and I love to be in a position to help other people.
Orlando, thank you very much for coming in today
Thank you.
and speaking to us about these very important issues. And I'm sure that we'll be back in touch with you as the gaming situation progresses.
Yes.
That is going to be a lot of top-of-mind awareness for folks. And folks, thanks you very much for watching another edition of Government Matters here on Focus Springfield.